Sure. Great to have you here, mate.
Good to be here, mate.
Great to see you.
Yes.
So many questions have come flooding through on the app as well. Good. You get named Australian cricket captain at one stage of your career. Were you ready?
I'm not sure whether they're ever ready to be Australian cricket captain. It's,
Yeah.
in a lot of ways I was, because I was 33 years of age, so I was, my game was in good shape. I was comfortable playing for Australia. I knew I could score runs. I knew I had the respect of the other players. So when I was given the captaincy, I think I was ready. If I was given the captaincy at 22, 23, I would have been lost, because there's much more to captaincy than just being on the field and making the right decisions. You've got to look after the media for a start, then you've got to look after the sponsors and respect the spectators, all the issues that go around the team, because playing on the field, as I say, is easy, but you've got 15 or 20 different people around the team you've got to manage. So the answer, quick answer, I guess, is yes, I was ready at 33. If I was given the job at 23, I wouldn't have been ready, because there's no real instruction manual to be Australian captain. You sort of learn on the job.
By the time you'd come to the end of it, were there certain things you'd gotten better at? Were there skills you didn't realise you didn't have when you started that by the end you'd rounded out? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, for instance, I guess, running a team meeting or getting up and making speeches, that wasn't my thing. I was very shy as a young person. Even now I'm reasonably shy. So to think that you've got to go up and make these speeches, and I'll give you an example of how nerve-wracking it can be, was when you actually meet the Queen. And because as captain, you've got the responsibility of making speeches, or actually talking to the Queen and having small talk and sort of representing the Australian cricket side. And the first time I had to introduce the players to the Queen was at the World Cup in 1999. And you're out on the field at Lords, which is a hello turf, and all the players are lining up, so you're having a quick check of all the players and just making sure they're all there. And for some reason, I had a bit of a mental blank, and I was looking at two of the players and I'm thinking, that's Damien Martin and Damien Fleming. I can't remember having two Damiens inside. For some reason I started to trick myself at, is there two Damiens in the cricket side? Well, I knew, because I played with them for 10 years, of course there was, but so I got along the order, and I went to Damien Martin. I said Damien Martin, because I got to introduce every player. Damien Martin, and the Queen, you shake the Queen's hand, and then I looked at Damien Fleming. I totally forgot his bloody name. So the Queen, pretty experienced, she just moved on, and we sort of had a bit of a laugh about it later on, and Flem said, can't believe you bloody forgot my name in front of the Queen. So sorry mate, it was just one of those things. And then a couple of years later, we're at the same thing. We're at a test match at 2001, again at Lords, where you play in an Ashes series. They don't do it anymore, but back then the Queen came out and met the players at lunchtime on probably the second day's play. So the same thing, and the players had lined up again along the on the Hello Turf, and I was introducing the players, and I knew Damien Fleming was coming up, so I did not forget his name this time. So going along, shaking the hand like Matthew Hayden and Shane Warne and Adam Gilchrist, and then got to about 3 or 4 away from Damien Fleming. I'd see him in the corner of my eye, and he was mouthing the words, "Don't fucking forget my name." I think, if the Queen can lip read, I'm in trouble here, but I got his name right. And so that's, I guess, an example of the pressures you don't expect a captain to be under. But I worried about those things more than playing, because cricket was easy for me, and captaining on the side came naturally. But all the other things around, like having 50-odd press conferences a year where you got to front the media, I got to learn how to handle those pretty well. But initially, you're sort of a bit intimidated, but I knew which journalists to trust. I knew that the half volleys would come first up, the first couple of questions, and then the questions out of left field, the real questions would come. So I learnt how to prepare better. I knew what the issues of the day were, and I learnt that at a press conference, it's up to me to get my message out, not answer the questions they want. It's all about what I want to say. So that's
being in control of that message.
Yeah, and that takes a lot of learning. And again, at 23, I would have had no idea. And an example of that at 25 is probably Steve Smith in Cape Town, where they asked him about what happened, and he said, "Oh, look, we made a mistake. We'll make sure it won't happen again." And they just didn't realise the gravity of the situation, didn't think it through, and thought they could just move on from that. Where obviously it was quite a bigger issue than that, and he should have got better preparation, or someone should have said, "Look, you need to answer it that way." So
you won't be surprised to know there's a couple of questions on the app about that. We'll get to it, but just going back. You just reeled off a few of the players. You said, Matthew Hayden, Adam Gilchrist, Shane Warne, and every person involved in the current Australian cricket team is going, one of them. Could we just have one of them? You were, some people have had to captain teams in all sorts of endeavours where it must be real, like the Australian World Cup rugby that's just finished, must be really hard captaining a team that is probably not good enough to win it. And that's a challenge. You had such an embarrassment of riches at some stage. Does that bring about its own different set of challenges?
Yeah, in a lot of ways. I actually would have really enjoyed the challenge of having a team that wasn't expected to win, because then you can create something special. I always look at Stephen Fleming, and they always say he's a great captain, but he was a good captain, but he had the opportunity to make mistakes, and no one cared about it because they didn't expect him to win. So you could throw caution to the wind, and if it didn't come off, it was no big deal. But if you're expected to win and something doesn't go right, then it falls straight back on the captain. So there is different types of pressures, and when you've got a really experienced side who are high quality players, they all want to be the star, they all want to do well. So you can't have every bowler taking 5 wickets, you can't have everyone scoring 100. So hosing down everyone's expectations and making them play as a unit, that's the biggest challenge when you've got high performing players, some high maintenance, some with big egos. Pulling all that together and managing that's a challenge in having a really good side.
Completely unrelated to anything you've just mentioned there in terms of maintenance or egos or anything like that. On the topic of Shane Warne, no, but I mean, you've
got to talk about yourself there for a second.
But you've got in someone like Warne, possibly once in the history of Test cricket player.
Yep.
And highly opinionated, incredibly backed his ability. And there must be people who lead teams like that here. What's it like? What's the secret to getting the best out of someone who genuinely thinks they're the best ever as it is? Yeah. How do you harness that and not make it something that's works against themselves or the entire group?
Yeah, look, perception is different to reality a lot of the time. You'll be surprised. A lot of those guys who you think have got everything under control and are very confident, actually the opposite to that. And even Shane was a bit like that in a lot of ways. I mean, I remember a test match in Cape Town where it was his 100th test match, and big celebration, and I'm about to go to toss 35 minutes before the game. So the toss is at 30 minutes before the start. This is 5 minutes before I'm going out. I've got my blazer on, my cap ready to go out. And the physio, Errol Alcott, come up and said, Warnie thinks he can't play. I said, what? I'm about to go toss. Like, I've written the names down on the sheet. He goes, he's got a bit of a hamstring issue and he thinks he can't play. And I said to Errol, who was a good mate of mine, I said, mate, can he play or not play? He goes, he can play. I said, okay, he's playing. So I didn't even ask him. And I went out there, did the toss, and ended up bowling 70 overs in the first innings. He never bowled more in his life. So sometimes you just got to give guys confidence, even though they appear as if they're the most confident. And another example with Shane was, when I became captain, I sort of tried to captain differently on my way. So a lot of the times we didn't bat first. That would seem to be the norm previously. That Ian Chappell once had the famous saying, you win the toss, 9 times out of 10 you bat straight away. The 10th time you think about it and bat. And I thought, well, that doesn't really make sense. Like, what's the point of that? So I thought we had a really good bowling side. So I wanted to win the test match as quickly as I could, take weather out of the equation, and sometimes I bowled more so than batting, which meant it was a different scenario for our spinners, because normally you bat first and it means you bowl last where the wicket's turning a lot, so it's great for your spinners. So Shane said in the media when I started doing this that his role in the team had changed, that now he wasn't going to take as many wickets because we weren't bowling in the 4th innings anymore. I thought, bloody hell, that's not a real positive comment. How am I going to sort of make this work in the media? So when they asked me about that, I said, look, that may well be the case, but he's such a great bowler. I think he can take 5 wickets on the first morning of a test match, so it doesn't matter whether he bat or bowl first. So I tried to turn it around, and then he didn't have any sort of fallback on that. So sometimes you've got to convince and trick players, but yeah, there are high maintenance players, low maintenance players in a team, and you've got to work out which button to push. I mean, as a leader, I always said, treat people equally but differently. So non-negotiables like being on time, uniform, how you treat spectators, they're non-negotiable, but you still want individual flair, charisma and talent to come through, so I let them play their own way, but there were certain things I had to comply with. When
you look at your test career, it goes from the full-time professionalism, but the hyper-modern athlete.
Yeah.
So, you've got players like Merv Hughes, large-in-life characters who probably, could have lost a couple of kilos to be at his peak, but all the way through to you're at the beginning of the super professional athlete age. But also you get the impression these days in terms of the way people lead. You hear Justin Langer, the Australian coach, will now regularly tell his players that he loves them. I get the impression Bob Simpson was not a sort of, hey dude, just want you to know that I love you type of guy. Have we, and I was speaking to an AFL coach recently who said 60 or 70% of his job these days is personality management and understanding people as people, as opposed to tactics and strategy. Have we moved into a new era in terms of that leadership in sport?
Yeah, there's a lot. It's a long question to start with, and it's probably part A, B, and C in that. But the first part was, it has changed a lot. When I first started playing, I mean, we were sponsored by Benson and Hedges, so our change room was full of smoke. Literally, it was. It was like haze of smoke. You come in the change room and you couldn't see anyone. It was like, because there was boxes and boxes of free cigarettes, and more than half the players were smokers. So it was, I'd probably smoked thousands of cigarettes without smoking one of my first 5 years of playing for Australia, and the other sponsor would have been something like VB or Foster's or Forex. So
game on.
You're smashing cans of beer and smoking. You're staying there change room for 3 hours after the game and eating meat pies and sausage rolls and whatever. So that was then. These days, they come off the field and they have an ice bath, some sort of muesli, some sort of protein bar, and a hydrolyte drink or something. So, yeah, the game has changed. I mean, in '89, Bernie drank 52 full-strength cans of beer on the way to England. That's how we started our Ashes campaign. Was who's going to try and break the drinking record, and Bernie did that, which was a great start to the tour. So. Nowadays,
I never understood why you got Australian of the Year after his efforts there. That was just unbelievable.
Well, he would have, except he never recognised, his wife wouldn't recognise that he did it, so it probably wouldn't have gone down that well with the family. But so yeah, times have totally changed. I went recently on the last Ashes tour, and the guys don't drink any alcohol from Sydney to London, so it's sort of frowned upon, and they don't do it. That's that part of the question. Second part, the different type of love. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Bob Simpson was. Yeah, the way he coached, when I first started playing, we didn't have a coach. My first test match was a physio and a manager, and the manager's job was to make sure the beers were cold and he got the tickets organised. So
you didn't have a
totally
coach?
True. No. First test match in Boxing Day test match, 1985. We flew down the day before the test match, so Christmas afternoon. We flew to Melbourne. Game starting next morning. I knew two of the players, Dave Gilbert and Greg Matthews. I'd never met the rest of the team. So I was in a team meeting, introducing myself for the first time, then playing for Australia the next morning. These days I went to England recently, and there were 17 players in the squad, 18 support staff. So the game has changed massively, and I think that sort of leads into your question about how you manage players, because they are a lot more fragile these days. They don't really like criticism, they're not used to it. And they're probably not used to thinking as much for themselves, because they've gone through the system of pathway cricket, where they're the stars, they get looked after. They've got this, people constantly around them telling them what to do and how to do it, and they've been coached, got the best coaches, best analysts around, they get all this information, but then sometimes on the field, in the heat of the battle, they don't know how to improvise, I think, on the field, because they've never had to do that. And if someone tells them they stuffed up, they take it very personally. So someone like Justin Langer, you've got to be very careful how you give information to players. Whereas back in our day, it was, if you're a dickhead, someone called you a dickhead, and you just had to cop it on the chin. So it's very different.
A question here from the audience, that the baggy green culture is in many ways accredited around your period, and then in some ways directly to you, everyone wearing that cap on the first session of the first day of the test match, etc. And this person asked, do you have any thoughts on corporate equivalents? I mean, everyone talks culture.
Yeah.
There's no organisation who'll proudly say, we don't have a culture. Do we overthink the concept? What does it even mean? What does culture mean at its heart?
Yeah, I don't know, to tell you the truth. It's an overused word. I guess culture means what you stand for, how you want to be perceived by others, and what your values are in a lot of way. And I think good teams or organisations, when people walk into that environment, they know straight away this is a good place. They get a good feel about it. It's got that X factor. You can't really put your finger on it, but you sort of know when something's good and when it's a bit off. And obviously the Australian team was a bit off in Cape Town. I think they're going back on the other path now. And maybe an example of culture change in that side, a really simple example was every morning, Mitch Marsh, one of the younger players, said, look, I mightn't be playing a lot during this test series, but I'm going to win the morning. So every morning I'm going to walk, and we're going to do a half-an-hour walk, and we'll go to a coffee shop and have coffee. And whoever wants to join me on that, they can come along. I thought, that's a bloody great initiative from a young bloke. So every morning I went with him. There's 3 or 4 regulars, and now the guys come in and out. But the point was that regular on those morning walks, we go and get coffee and then walk back to the hotel. And many times you see homeless people on the streets, and quite often these guys are buying extra coffees to hand out on the way home back to the hotel. I thought, gee, that's something I haven't really seen in a sports side before, that they're actually buying coffees, not thinking about themselves, but they're thinking about other people on the way home. In the change room after the first test, we won, had the massive celebration, and of course the beer goes everywhere and people carrying like pork chops for 20 minutes, half hour. we used to carry on for about 3 or 4 hours and leave the room an absolute mess and just walk out and say, thanks very much, thanks for coming, we've cleaned you up, and that was it. But after we had the celebration at Edgbaston, I looked around, all of a sudden there was like 15 guys toweling down the walls and cleaning every bit of rubbish up, and the room was spotless, and that came from the All Blacks, legacy. So
in the All Blacks post-change room, the most senior players would be the last to leave, and they would make sure the change room was clean.
Yeah, so Justin's big on that, and and learning those lessons. And I had the privilege of having lunch with Sir Alex Ferguson with Justin while I was over there. So always trying to learn off different people, and he had some great messages. But the one that resonated with me was, and I'd read a bit about Sir Alex Ferguson. I said, is it true that until you make the first 11, you're not allowed to wear coloured boots? You have to wear black boots. And he said, yes, that was my 100% my rule, because I said, if you've got to earn the right, you've got to deserve to wear coloured boots. You can't just wear coloured boots in the second 11. You have to do the hard yards, and if you make the first team, then you can wear whichever coloured boots. That was just a little example of the culture of Manchester United when he was there. They had to earn your stripes and know your place and respect what was going on.
So could Sandpaper Gate have happened under a team you captain? Could something like that have happened?
If I knew about it, no way. Yeah. I mean, the odds were, as a captain, you would know what's going on. I think I never asked the guys. I was there with them 4 months. I never asked one question about it because it's gone and there's no point in dragging it up again. But I think the issue Steve Smith probably had was that he may have been aware of it and didn't want to know about it. I think if you walk past that, then I guess you're guilty by not doing anything about it. I mean, it's definitely not in his makeup to do that, Steve Smith. But as a captain leader, you've got to take the fall because you're in charge of that organisation.
And the interesting thing, I think, in the case of Steve Smith, and I think this applies directly to the corporate world, there's no doubt that he's the most talented cricketer in that team.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, really struggles with the totality of the press conferences and keeping sponsors happy. So obsessed with his cricket, struggles to get a decent night's sleep as it is.
Yeah.
Is he the perfect example, and sometimes in the corporate world as well, the boss of the whole show doesn't have to be the most talented person. They have to be the most appropriate person to be the boss.
Yeah.
I've always said, if Steve Smith had a Steve Waugh around who could have been Australian cricket captain, and your job would have just been to tell him, mate, just go and keep averaging the second highest average in the history of Test cricket. And mate, come and talk to me if you think I should make a bowling change. I'm happy to listen. But you just concentrate on. I think he would have had a completely different career.
Yeah, and there's a difference between leadership, good leadership, and good captains. I think that's different roles, and it's hard to get both. I think Michael Clarke was probably a really good example of a really good captain, but not so much great leadership. The other guys probably didn't want to follow him in as much as some other leaders because he's a little bit different the way he did things. That was his own style. So I'm not here to criticise him, but it's hard to get both into one package. And someone like Steve Smith, he's. I've never seen someone more obsessed with their batting. He lives and breathes cricket and batting, and it's really hard for him to sort of introduce all these other elements into his thinking because he's so obsessed with being the best batsman. So, I haven't really made any comment on it, but I'd be happy to see him just bat for Australia and help out whoever is leading the team. Tim Payne's doing a pretty good job. I don't think he has to come back and ever be captain again. I think his value to the side is just being an amazing batsman. And as you say, he doesn't sleep. During that Test match at Edgbaston, I was amazed that in 5 days he got 144 and 142. He hadn't played first class cricket for 16 months. He had the crowd booing him. He had the most amount of pressure probably ever on a batsman. And to do that was probably the most extraordinary Test performance nearly of all time.
Let's
and
go
he
into
didn't
that.
sleep.
Yeah, because for the non-cricket fans in the audience, even everyone would have seen the headlines. We're talking here, someone coming back from the lowest it could possibly be. What did that represent? The cricketing part of it was amazing, but the human journey was incredible. What was it like to be there? Because you were an advisor to the team, sitting there knowing you were watching history like that. Yeah,
look, I was just watching it. I hadn't been that close to the team for a long time, so I was just amazed by his preparation. The amount of cricket balls he hit, I couldn't do it. I would have been a mess before the game. I would have been mentally buggered and physically knackered as well. He literally batted for... Graham Hick was a bowling coach, and he throws balls not with his arm these days. It's called the wanger. So the thing you throw the ball, if you got a dog, you throw the ball, tennis ball.
Dog on the beach, yep.
Yeah. So he in the nets, and he would have had 3 or 4 hours in the 3 or 4 days leading up each day just through throwdowns. And I was watching, and he came out after an hour in the nets, and Graham Hick would say, "How are you going?" He said, "Oh, I can't find my hands." I'm thinking, what the hell is he talking about? Can't find my hands, like. he's the world's best batsman. Surely know where your hands are on the bat, but he's so obsessed and so particular with how he feels that he couldn't get the feel right. Another hour later, he comes out, he goes, I'm okay, I've found my hands, I'm good, there's no problem. And he'll say stuff like, Lords, they've got the big honour board. He says, well, you may as well put my name down on the honour board now. I'm going to get 100. He just knows, but he's not, I never took it as him being bragging or arrogant. He just knew he was going to get 100. Because he's like a computer. Everything goes into his brain. He analyses things. And I said, when you're not sleeping, what do you do? He goes, well, my eyelids are closed, but I can't go to sleep. So I think about all the bowlers and how they're going to bowl to me. So I've got every scenario covered. So when he gets on a test match, no ball is a surprise. It's already in his head. And when they produce it, it's like, I know what the answer is to that. And you can just see him like he just, and he completely throws the opposition off because I describe him like being like a matador. He sort of hangs a cape out there and they bowl it, then he lets it go. And he wants the bowler to bowl at his stumps because he said, they won't get me out if they bowl at the stumps because I won't miss it. And then as soon as they bowl at the stumps, he just picks them off. And the only time I saw him in a bit of trouble was in the last test with Sam Curran, because that was the guy that came into the test pretty late, and he swung the ball around, and he hadn't had time to really analyse it and put it in the
sit there with the eyelids closed, picturing Sam Curran.
Yeah, he didn't have it in. I watched him the first couple of hours, and I think, shit, he's out of sync here. He doesn't know what's going on. And you see him really struggling, and he was playing shots in his mind. I'm going, he's trying to work him out as he goes along, and then he finally got it, and he was okay. So,
but the fact that you said, I watched him for the first couple of hours and he looked a bit unsteady, the fact that he was out there for a couple of hours looking a little bit off shows the size of the achievement.
Yeah, look, he's certainly different and amazing. And I do fear a little bit for how he'll go when things aren't going well because he's so totally focused. And in a lot of ways, I don't think that's really healthy. I mean, but again, he's a one-off. He may break the mold, but I think if you only got one thing in your life and it doesn't go quite right, what do you fall back on, or how do you relax, or what's the short circuit to get away from it? So that'll be his danger if he doesn't do well. How does he compartmentalise that? Because he's not used to failure.
Let me ask you. Let's go through a bit of some of the highlights of your career. Let's go back. I was lucky enough to interview Ricky Ponting, the former Australian captain, last year, and I asked him when did he first realise, actually, I'm pretty good at this. And he told a story about when he was about 11, was playing in Tasmania, played for a little club called Mowbray. So you're talking country cricket in Tasmania. He was in the C grade team, and someone got ill on the morning, so he had to play in the A grade grand final.
Yeah.
And Tasmanian country cricket, it's the grand final, so no one felt twice about trying to knock this 11-year-old's head off his shoulder. And he scored about 40 odd or something, and thought, wow, yeah, okay. Can you remember before, not a test century, can you remember an innings early in your career where you finally thought, okay, I clearly have something?
You never really think about it too much. I mean, all those imaginary test matches in the front and backyard, you think you're okay, but you're only playing against your brothers, which turned out to be pretty good preparation. But trying to think, probably, similar sort of story. My first game of grade cricket, I was only 13, I think, playing for Bankstown. And I got called up later. There was someone was sick, and it was Friday night, and they said, can you play 5th grade? Make your 5th grade debut. And I said,
at
okay.
13?
13, I think I was, 13. I was pretty young. And the captain was this older guy. I remember his name, Ted Baker, not the fashion guy, but he was about 60, so he was old school, and he was pretty tough. And I came in the change room, and he just basically said, look, because you're replacing someone, you can bat at number 11. So, okay, no worries, whatever. And so first things, I think we got bowled out for about 80 or 90, and I was 25 not out batting 11. I thought, did okay there. Second innings, I thought you might get a bit of a promotion here. He goes, no, you're batting 11 again. And sure enough, I got 30 not out in the second innings. Got bowled out for 100 again, and he didn't say well played or anything, but it's probably one of those moments I thought, okay, I've done all right here. Like I'm 25 not out, 30 not out, and no one else got any runs, and I'm against these adults. Maybe I'm okay.
You go on to have the career. We touched on some of the highlights. 32 Test centuries. 10 times in Test cricket, you're dismissed between 90 and 99. I don't know if you know, the most in the history of Test cricket.
Yeah.
Most 90s. I mean, I'd give anything to score 5 runs in a Test match.
Yep.
To score 90, I couldn't believe it. But it's meant to be also, in some ways, it's a failure to get that close to 100.
Yep.
What's a test? You're an expert. What's a Test 90 like?
Yeah. Well,
it's an incredible achievement.
I got to pull you up firstly because you're big on stats and you got a couple of mathematical books. But You weren't quite right there.
Oh.
I got 10 90s, but I was dismissed 8 times. I didn't get out 10 times in the 90s.
2 not outs.
Checked out, yeah,
okay,
2 not outs.
Great.
Yeah. So in actual fact, Michael Slater and Rahul Dravid have been out 9 times in the 90s. So
You're up there.
yeah, I'm up there, definitely. I fucked up a few times, yeah. I think I maybe, it took a long while to get a Test 100, 26 Test matches, 42 innings, and I was brought up in a bit of a tough school. Alan Border captain. He was sort of a reluctant captain. We lost a lot. I didn't win a Test match till 18 months into my career, so it was hard yards back then. I think runs were special to me, and when I got my first 100, it was like you graduated, and there was a big emphasis back on those. Well, there sort of is now, but back then it was a big thing about how many hundreds you scored, whether you were a really good Test match batsman. So maybe every time I got to 90, I just put a bit too much pressure on myself. And I look at the modern day players, and they get to 90 and they think, I can get 100 in the next 2 balls, a 4 and a 6. Whereas back then we thought, let's get 10 singles, make sure we got it. So if there's one thing I could change in my career, would be my mindset when I got to 90 and just not worry about it and just play my shots. And I'm sure out of those 8 times I got out, and maybe 4 or 5 of those I would have got 100. So it shows something about sometimes you can fear something too much or want it too much, and then you take your eye off the ball. So I definitely was probably too conservative and wanted it too much.
On the topic of Test 100s, I'm pretty sure I'm not sure if it's actually in the Constitution, but if you ever interview Steve Waugh, you are obliged, and I'm almost excited to touch on one amazing moment. This is January the 2nd, 2003. Australia are playing England, the old enemy. It's the SCG, it's the 5th Test, it's the first day. And Steve's gone out to bat. We're not in a great situation when you go out. It's a bit sort of up and down. We start to get it together near the end of the day. We go into the last over of the Test match. You're on 95. Let's roll the video through. The first few balls, you're very circumspect, respectful. You're on 95 at this stage. Something has to happen. You give that a bit of a whack. It races out there. You run 3.
Yeah.
So just pause that video for a second. That takes you to 98.
Yeah.
There's 2 balls to go, but you're not facing anymore.
My maths is not good, is it?
Is there part of you that's thinking, let's just stop on 97, I'll have a slog at this? You're not even thinking about yourself at that stage? I mean, 2 runs off a second.
Yeah, and I was 95 at the start of the over. Richard Dawson bowling, I'm thinking, this guy's not a bad bowler, but not the scariest Test bowler I faced. I'm banking on him bowling 2 loose balls. I think I can get a single and a 4, or a 4 and a 1, whichever way around it was going to be. And but I thought, what I've got to do is just respect him as well, because you can't get too carried away, because that's the moment you get in trouble. And I thought, I'll just trust myself. He's going to bowl some loose balls. You just wait for it to happen. And sure enough, the first 3 balls he bowled right on the money. I played defensive shots. And I thought, well, I'm out running out a bit of time. I've got 3 balls left. I've got to do something. And next ball, I sort of manufactured that shot and hit it out through point.
Did you think for a second it was going all the way to the fence?
My initial thought was I'm going to run 4, because there was no cover. There was no point. And I thought if I hit that well enough to get it close to the boundary, pretty quick, I reckon I can get back for 4. But as I turned around for the second, I thought, shit, you misjudged that. and I was sort of committed to the 3, and I thought, oh, bloody hell, I've stuffed up here. I don't think I can get it. My initial thought was, you've missed the opportunity. It would have been great to get it. But then I thought, hang on, I've got Gilly at the other end. He's a batting genius. He'll make something happen here. And thankfully, Hussain bought into it, because he could have brought the field up and made it impossible for Gilchrist to get a single, really. But I think he wanted me back on strike, because he knew if I got back on strike with 1 ball to go that I would probably go for it, and there was a chance of then getting a wicket. So he dropped the field back, and I guess we're going to play the video, eh?
Let's have a look. Here, roll it on here. And there's even a little bit of gamesmanship here when Gilly's facing this ball. He just pulls away for a sec. So the mind games are on. You're confident Gilly's going to work a 1 here?
I'm not thinking much, I don't reckon, at the time. I'm hoping. But you see, he actually bowled that on leg stump. I think they wanted a single.
Just pause it there. So there's not a bit of you that's thinking running 2 there, is there? No,
I'm thinking, I've got another chance. I've been saved,
Is there? And I mean, I'm asking you to recall stuff from 15 years on.
Yep, it's all good stuff. I'll remember it. Don't worry.
Are you? Is it? Yep. It can't just be just another ball.
No, look, I knew there was that moment. It doesn't come along very often for a lot of players. In fact, most times it doesn't come along. But I was thinking back when I was actually at that moment thinking about Doug Walters, because when I was growing up, there's a few people over 50 years, so watching Doug Walters hit Bob Willis last ball of the day for 6 at Perth. Anyone see that on TV?
Oh.
Yeah, a few there. And I was watching, going, geez, how good's that? Like, he's just 6 last ball to get 100, just walked off as if nothing else happened. I thought, geez, how good would that be? So then I got that moment, I thought, this is my chance. Like, I can get a 4 off the last ball to get 100 or 2 runs or whatever. And I could walk off and with all the applause, and I won't have to go to bed tonight 98 not out and probably sleep for about 1 hour, because you go, if you're 90 odd not out or 80 not out overnight, you think about the next day, how you're going to get the 100. So you go through every ball in your mind, so it's pretty torturous. So you actually want to try and get there so you get a decent night's sleep. So yeah, I got down there and I thought, well, again, just trust my instinct. I knew they were thinking I was going to play my favourite shot, which was a slog sweep across the line. So I'm thinking, don't play that unless it's the right ball. So all those thousands of hours of practice, just let it happen naturally. And that was my thought as he came in the bowl. But before that, I got to the crease. Are we going to stop it again? You can tell we haven't done this before. But
yeah, no, we'll play it in a couple of seconds. No, we'll go all the way through. So you tell us.
We're going all the way.
Tell us what we're about to see.
All right, okay. Yeah, so I get to the crease, sort of wipe the sweat off my brow, and it's funny you trick yourself into things when you're batting. I'm very superstitious, because I had the red hanky in my pocket, and I always use that when I batted and wipe the sweat away. And I did it this time, pulled it out, wiped the sweat away, and looked down, and a couple of strands of the red rag had dropped onto the crease line. And it's funny what you convince yourself, and I thought, well, that's an omen, like it's meant to be. I'm going to get 100, like that's good luck. Like, it's nothing to do with bloody good luck. But you think cricket is like that. You trick yourself into believing stupid stuff, and so that was that. Then Alex Stewart was actually pretty good. He goes, "Oh mate, you write your own scripts, do you? Like, you know, this is pretty amazing." So he I think he wanted me to get 100, Alec. I played a lot against him. And then NASA went into the mind games, and he went down to the bowler Richard Dawson, and they talked about, could have been what they're going to have for dinner, or what movie they're going to watch. It was nothing about cricket, obviously. It was just wasting time and setting up the scene and trying to build it up and put a bit more pressure on. And
just before the ball comes out, the crowd, you'll notice in a second, are screaming. You talked about Steve Smith and the booing. With that, do you hear it and block it out?
Yeah.
Do you genuinely not even hear it? Is it just background? Could you tell the crowd were going wild?
Well, I guess it's a bit like if someone's bored here today, they're sort of half blocking me out. They sort of know I'm talking, but they're not sure what I'm saying. It's a bit like that when you're playing cricket, I reckon. You're out in the middle, you can hear all the noise, but you sort of block it out. It doesn't really matter to you. It's sort of that white noise that's going on, but you don't really don't take it in too much. And it's funny because when I got the 100, it was like someone turned the volume on full, and I could hear everything. It was just every noise just came out like it exaggerated. But before that ball, no, you're aware of the buzz on the ground, and you know people want you to get 100. But I was just trying to say, look, stay focused. Just another ball. This guy's, he's not the greatest bowler. Like, the opportunity will come if you trust yourself. And
spoiler alert, let's roll the video and see what happens.
Okay, hopefully I can get it.
Richard Dawson thinking, I'm about to become the great trivia question of all time here.
Yes. He's probably made some money out of it over the years, hasn't he? Yeah, I'm not sure what he was saying, man.
You'll take that any day of the week.
Yeah.
Did you realise the moment hit did you realise that's going to be one of the iconic images in the history of Test cricket? How long after something like that does the adrenaline calm down and you realise, well, hold it, I've done something?
I was just watching that ball. I reckon he wanted me to get 100 away bowl that ball. It's like, it's wide up, fully on it. It's like, here you go, it's a freebie. But when I hit that, I didn't even feel it come off the bat, but I knew straight away it was 4. And as I say, that's when the volume got turned up, and it was like this massive influx of noise and emotion, and yeah, it was a huge relief because I was under a lot of pressure going into the Test match, and the journalists were saying, when are you going to retire? You passed your best. And I remember one question one of the journalists asked me, said, what's been the highlight of your career? And I said, well, hopefully it's going to be in this match. And I didn't realise this was going to happen, but I guess that was the mindset that I was determined to prove a few people wrong, that I still had something to show. But yeah, walking off, it was the noise was amazing, and I just went and changed, and I sat down, and I didn't say a word. I sat on the floor, and I think my dad was there, and John Howard was there. John Howard was regularly there in the change room. He was a great supporter.
G'day, Steve. How you going, Prime Minister? How you going?
Yeah, a bit like that. He was, but he was a really good support. So they were all around, and then the noise outside was just, it was like a rock, like an encore. There was it just continual noise, and it was chanting for me to go outside. So I went out on the balcony, sort of waved, and that sort of happened 3 times. I mean, people were there for like 20, 30 minutes, and I often say to people, if I give you 10 minutes of my career, I'll give you those 10 minutes, because it was like nothing else I'd ever experienced, and it was a great honour, I suppose, to score that in front of my own crowd, but also share that and for people to feel so good about it.
One of the other highlights of your career must have been those ding-dong battles between Bankstown and Petersham in the mid-1980s against Kieran McKenna, the handy opening batsman and medium pacer. But
Was he?
yeah, was he? I love it. But you also you met him in a context outside of cricket where he impressed you. Tell us about that.
Mind you, speaking about sledging, Petersham invented sledging. That team, Dave Chardon and Brian Riley, all those guys. Did you play with those guys? Yeah, they invented sledging, Petersham Cricket Club, because they're from a baseball background. So when you played against these guys, like I remember playing the first time against Petersham, and you're batting and you're hitting a shot, and the guys were just commentating on your batting, and they'd, oh mate, that's a shit house shot. Where'd you come from? You're bloody hopeless. And then when they're batting and you misfield the ball, they'd be sledging your fielding. I'm thinking, where are these guys from? So that was where I learned how to sort of have banter on the cricket field. But
just quickly on the topic of sledging before we move to where you met, did you say to Herschel Gibbs, how does it feel to drop the World Cup?
Oh, something like that, mate. It was pretty close, yeah. Let's not change it. I can't remember exactly, but it's good enough.
Words to that effect.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Where did you meet Kieran again? Where did you
Kieran was on my first couple of captain's rides, which is coming up in 2 weeks' time. That's the major fundraiser for my Steve Waugh Foundation charity. And that supports kids who suffer from rare diseases. So I wanted to come up with a fundraising event that people would come to me the following year and say, I want to be back on that event. I don't want to keep asking people to come to functions. I think you've got to give them a life experience, and this was definitely a life experience. We said, let's come up with a concept where people want to come, and everyone was into bike riding, so I said, let's ride from Sydney to Byron Bay. Just sort of threw the idea up, and it sounded pretty good until I realised how far it was.
It's a long
it was like 820 k's and 10,500 metres of climbing over 6 days, and my training for the first event was riding out from Cronulla out to Kurnell. It was a bit of a hill there, about 50 metres. I thought, I got good preparation for this. Till I got the first hill out of Wiseman's Ferry, which is 12-kilometre hill, and I nearly died on the first hill. But
it's your ride. You've got to make it.
Exactly. So that was what I realised, what an idiot I was. And after that, I trained properly. But the idea was that our kids suffer each and every day. They've got great attitudes. They never complain. And we've got to step into their shoes for 6 days and feel what it's like to suffer in a lot of ways and get on with it. And we always say at the start of each ride, you can whinge as much as you want, but no one's going to listen or care. So it's up to you, your attitude you're taking. So it's all about attitude. People have got to raise money to get on the ride. We have great Australians come along. Anna Mears is coming this year again. Oh. She's riding.
Adam Goods has started a couple of times.
Goods come like Mark Webber. We've got Daley Thompson comes out from the UK every year. We've got Craig Johnson coming this year. Kurt Fernley. Michael Milton does it with one leg, which it defies belief. I mean, I've followed him up in Tasmania, a place called Queenstown, which was 199 switchbacks up this mountain, and he's doing it with one leg. And not talking about like, his other leg is taken off at the hip right up here. So he's literally doing it on one leg. So these amazing Australians come along, and we try and bring along understated Australians. This year we've got a young girl called Alyssa Azar from Toowoomba. We're riding from Toowoomba. She's the youngest female ever to climb Everest. Last year we had a guy called Tim Cope, who's an adventurer. So I try and bring along amazing Australians that probably haven't had the publicity that they deserve, and they speak each night. And we hear stories, and we have stories of our kids who are quite inspirational and amazing. And I've just come from a function actually where a young boy called Liam Titterton, who we first supported 11 years ago when he was 5 years of age. The first thing we gave him was this Dynavox V machine, which was a communication device on his wheelchair. And he could only use one or two fingers. He could never speak. They thought he'd never speak. Well, today, 11 years later, he interviewed me in front of 1,000 people at his school. So that 11 years, and he's done that. So it's pretty amazing.
Well, the word behind us here, curious, is a big part of this view, because your foundation deals with rare diseases.
Yep.
But the point you make is, these are diseases, they're rare, not many people have them, but there are so many tens of thousands of rare diseases. There are so many chromosomal defects, etc. You say rare diseases are surprisingly common.
Yeah.
But why, and also there's a real bravery on your part in picking this. I don't mean to be, you could have gone for one of the established cancers, could have gone for one of the things where there's a mechanism already existing and just raised money and pumped it through.
Sure.
You've almost created this philanthropic industry in Australia around rare disease. Why did you choose that, and how tough was that?
I don't know whether I choose it, it just happened. I mean, curious is a word that I really resonates with me. I always want to be curious and ask questions and inquisitive, and that's why I love India so much, because there's so many things there I've never seen before in your experience. So that sort of got me into a lot of, I had great moments on the field, but I had life-changing moments off the field where I had the opportunity one day, had a day off on tour, and normally day offs on tour you sit around the pool and don't do too much, but I was always keen to get out and take photographs and meet people, and I knew that Calcutta was where Mother Teresa was, and I found out that you could actually meet her. You could go to one of her early morning masses if you wanted to. It was pretty simple actually, and got a rickshaw there and took one of the security people with me and went to one of the early morning masses, witnessed that, met Mother Teresa briefly, and just thought she was the most amazing person I've ever met. You know, deals with the poorest of the poor, no regard for material possessions, her whole life was helping people. I thought maybe I can do that in some small way down the track, and the opportunity came a year later when I was in India again, and that was to help kids who in this rehabilitation centre called Udayan, and that was for children who'd been brought up in leprosy colonies. So they were taken out of that environment, given schooling, 3 meals a day, and looked after really well. So I went and visited this place at the request of the lady who was trying to fund it, and I thought, this is amazing, like these kids are totally transformed, but I want to see where they came from, to see what the difference was. And I said, could you take me into a leprosy colony? And that was a question that sort of shocked a lot of them, because no one had ever asked them to do that. And but I wanted to know what it was like to live in a leprosy colony. And it's, as you imagine, the worst possible place you could go to or visit. The place I went to was probably about twice the size of this. There's 2,000 people living in it. No running water, no electricity. The sanitation was poor. The kids were running amok. The parents were sitting around with open wounds from the leprosy. It was a terrible place, like hell basically. They lived in sort of ramshackle mud huts with a bit of plastic and bricks and whatever they could cobble together to sort of have any sort of shelter. They had 1 or 2 pots and pans, and that was it. And but at the time, the place I went to was only supporting boys, and I said, well, why aren't you supporting girls? And they said, because the boys are the breadwinners, that's why we look after the boys first. And I said, well, okay, that's fair enough, but what do the girls do? Because I just had my first daughter, Rosie. I said, okay, what do the girls do? Like, they're stuck in this leprosy colony. And they said, well, unfortunately, by the time they're 7 or 8, they will have to sell themselves on the streets to make money for their family. And that, again, was one of those moments where I think, I can't pretend I didn't hear that. Like, you've got to do something about it. So that's when I started raising money for the girls' wing, and that's 20 years down the track, there's 100 odd girls. So that started me in a charity, and I realised it worked. And then when I retired from cricket in Australia, I thought, well, I've always been inspired by kids with courage and character. Let's help the kids who've got nowhere to turn. And then it started with that, and then it evolved into, after my wife did all the research, we found that most of the kids we were supporting fitted into the category of having a rare disease, which is classified as a prevalence of less than 1 in 10,000. There are 6,000 to 8,000 rare diseases. 7 or 10% of the population will have a rare disease. So again, we had the conundrum where we were overwhelmed by people coming in because there was such a big need. And I thought, well, let's help the ones who have got no support groups and no government funding. And they're the ones with a prevalence of roughly less than 2 in 100,000. And there's about 500 of those rare diseases. They're the ones you don't hear of, you don't know the names. And often, a lot of the kids we support are called SWANs, so they're symptoms without a name, so they're never diagnosed. When you're never diagnosed because the doctors don't know what it is, you can't go anywhere for help. You don't fit anywhere. So we're the only standalone charity in Australia that does that, and that's my wife would dedicate 50 hours a week to that. She's done it the last 15 years. So we have a lot of volunteers. Harley, my manager's up the top there, is responsible for a lot of our fundraising. We've got an amazing group of volunteers. We only have 3 paid staff. So yeah, we try and punch above our weight.
You do, but the thing that is fascinating about it, I find, is that this is tough. This is a tough space to be in. You have to work hard there.
Yep.
But I've seen how rewarding it is for you as well. This is not just a tick the boxes to feel good about yourself. I find that fascinating. I mean, how much that's given to you.
Yeah, definitely.
But it is really hard.
Yeah, it is, yeah. And you're right. I mean, when people ask me now my role models are the kids we support because they're bloody amazing. I mean, I'm inspired by them. I filmed with 6 kids a couple of weeks ago. We filmed the stories for the ride, so they're all these amazing different stories, and each one is unique and different. And the little boy we filmed a couple of weeks ago has got a rare condition where his pituitary gland doesn't work, and that means basically that's the master control for your whole body. So that means you can't control your hormones or your kidneys or your blood or anything. So he's got to have injections for the rest of his life every day. He's got to have medications for every day for the rest of his life, and that's just a constant balance. It's very expensive, and Then we have another child with a condition called Krabbe disease, which life expectancy is 3. He was 2 years of age, so you talk to that family and they know he's not going to live another 12 months. So, I mean, they're tough stories, all of them.
But the way it inspires you, incredible. You're going back to India also, again, curious about that place, on a photographic project early next year?
Yeah, next year. Look, when people sort of say, what are you going to be doing in a couple of years? I always say, look, I hope I'm going to be doing something I didn't expect to do. I don't want to be doing the same thing that I know I'm good at, because I think I learned from cricket that, you got to push yourself and test yourself and find out what you're capable of, and to fulfill your potential, you got to sometimes take a risk. And I don't see it as a failure these days, I just see it as an experience. So, taking the charity on and then trying to raise $1 million at our first dinner we thought wasn't possible, we end up doing it. I think a lot of times we stop ourselves because we're scared of failure, but I'm a big believer in just going for it and then working out how to do it later on. Sometimes you drag a lot of people in with you and you go, bloody hell, what are you doing this time? But you somehow find a way, but now I've forgotten the question. What was the question?
The photography project in particular, tell us about that.
Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah, look, next year I want to be doing stuff that I'm passionate about. I enjoy photography, I love India. And I've always thought, why is cricket such a religion in India? What makes it more than a game there? So I want to try and capture through the lens, what it makes cricket a religion in India. So I'm going all around India, and it's not just about playing cricket, it's about the people associated with it, the people that manufacture the bats, just why it's a way of life. We're going to some blind cricket, girls cricket, going up to the Himalayas, all these different places, and capturing what is the essence or what is the spirit of cricket. And I also want to do a documentary next year around a similar sort of theme. So yeah, they're the projects that interest me, and Canon have been a great supporter, and I like learning about different things. Again, being curious and working out how to get better at things, how to learn different skills, and to put myself out there.
For people who don't know how intense cricket is, it's well beyond a sport in India. A friend of mine was playing on a tour in India, handy cricketer, and they're playing on this big oval, and while they're playing they look up, and on the road beside the oval this traditional Indian funeral procession starts coming past, and the body is on a cart and there's oxen taking it and people walking in front and behind, and it's quite striking and moving. And my mate sort of says to the guy, let's just stop for a second and be respectful as they go past. And so the players all just sort of stop. And then a few metres later they realise, well, the funeral procession stopped. They're stopping to watch the cricket. and so they play a little bit of cricket, and he said it was honestly like the procession was walking past thinking, well, he's not going anywhere, and it's what he would have wanted anyway. These people honestly, and you could tell they thought it was just the perfect part of the day for them. It's incredible. Let's close on that. You've mentioned the word a couple of times, curiosity. I mean, you're lucky, you're blessed with it. Why is being curious so important and so fulfilling for people?
Yeah, look, I must admit at school, I was bad at school. I didn't really want to learn, and I didn't read any books. Then I started reading books, and I think, geez, this is bloody fantastic. Like, how much are you learning? So to me, being curious, asking questions is the only way you learn and develop and fulfill your potential, really. I think if you're not curious and you don't sort of look out for what might be going on or how you can see things differently, then you keep doing the same thing day after day. And look, that might be okay for a lot of people. I don't look down or blame people who aren't that curious, but for me, I couldn't think of anything worse than not challenging things or looking at things differently or taking another task on. So being curious, I think, is the most important trait to have as a person for me.
And it's been an absolute pleasure to ask some questions of you this afternoon. Can we please thank our special final guest for Curious English 2019, Steve Waugh, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, mate.
Cheers, mate.